Hello, welcome to Discover Dorico 5 live stream. I'm John from the Dorico team here at Steinberg. Today I'm going to show you through many of the, but not all of the new features in Dorico 5. I'm going to be using Dorico Pro today, but many of the options are also available in Elements SE and on the iPad. So talking of which, I'll be checking the live comments as well, of course, and I can see that Daniel's in there, so there'll be other people also answering the comments as we go. So speaking of some of the other versions, I'll be using Dorico Pro, but if you're using Dorico SE, then Dorico SE5 is now free, of course, as it always was, but you can use it for up to 8 players now. So, and there's some of the new features we'll be showing today are also in SE, but probably the main thing you'll be looking at is the number of players you can use. Dorico Elements, it's probably the best value option. It's now unlimited players, so it was 24 players in Dorico 4, and it's now an unlimited number of players. And also there are more engraving and playback options from the Pro version, which are now in Elements as well. And a lot of the new features we'll be looking at today will also be included in Elements. And if you're using the iPad version of Dorico, that's also updated today. The version number also now is version 5, so we've kind of skipped a few officially, but it will match as well, and the features will as well. So of course you can start using that one for free. It's now 8 players as well, although if you also log in with your free Steinberg account, then you can have 12 players. And of course the subscription and lifetime unlock options are also available, and that makes the iPad version actually very similar to Dorico Elements, and it will also include now a lot of the engraving and playback options from Dorico Elements as well. And if you go to dorico.com, you can see a full comparison chart there with all of the details on it and everything else. So looks like the sound is okay, and I can see all the chat over there, so shall we get started, and let's dive in and have a look at some of these new options. So I thought we'd start today with this one, which is a bit of Mozart. For the eagle-eyed, you may notice a couple of changes as well, even to just the edges of the screen and things like the status bar at the bottom. So right at the very bottom corner of the screen here, the concert pitch, transposed pitch, they're now buttons that you can use to switch the view. It won't work in this particular project because this one's in C, and all of the instruments in C as well, but anyway, they're there for most of your projects. At the bottom, just near my shoulder over here, there's a follow playback toggle now. So the playhead, the green play line, if you want the score to move when playback's happening, then leave that on. If you don't, you can just toggle that and turn it off, and you can set a shortcut if you don't want that one. And if I just get out of the way, then also behind where I was, down in the bottom corner, there's new items down here for page view and galley view. Instead of being a drop down, then they're buttons as well. So they'll update if you use the shortcuts or whatever you use. Now you can't see them because I'm back. Right, so there's a few, for the eagle-eyed, few interface changes and things on there. So let's have a look at some of these other things. So we're going to start with some of the playback things today, and then we'll move on later to some of the other kind of engraving and composition and that kind of things as well. So the first thing on the playback side is if I open up the lower panel down here, there's a new button down here in the center, which is Live Stage. So I'm going to choose that one. Now, this is a project that was originally I had in Dorico 4. So this is what would happen. You'd have all of your players in the middle, because previous versions of Dorico would have just centered everybody. So basically the pan position and also the reverbs were all the same. So everybody, basically, your whole orchestra was all sat on top of each other. And what you can now do, if you want to, is you could drag these out and you can position these players wherever you want to. That would be it'd take you a little while. So you'll find also for new projects, they will already have this loaded. So any new projects you start in Dorico 5 will already have a stage template loaded. And if you open your existing projects, you can just choose a stage template, press apply and close, and the orchestra will then be distributed for that layout, so everybody's where you expect. Now you can still move them around, so I can still click on these players and I can move them around. I can use these buttons at the bottom. So this one is expand and this one is contract. If I don't have anything selected, or if I select all of them, then I can also expand them all and contract them. So it depends on the, I guess, on the COVID guidelines at the time for social distancing as to how far apart you want those to be. But what's happening here is that for each of these, Dorico is now setting the right pan control here, and also it will be setting the reverb controls that we'll have a look at in the main mixer in a second. So that's the first bit, is the kind of the live stage bit. So when you play back this, if you've got headphones on, then you'll hear more of a spatial difference for all of these players. And if you haven't got headphones on, you may not notice yet. Get some headphones. In the top right-hand corner, there's also a little button up here, which is scrub playback. So this was a much requested feature. You can press that button and your cursor will then turn into a little speaker icon. But you can also do it by holding down on a Mac, that I am, it's Alt-Shift. So it's Alt spacebar, sorry. And then my cursor's changed. On a PC, it's Control spacebar. And then if I move over the notes slowly, then Mozart begins to sound like the Addams Family. And you can play backwards too if you move the mouse backwards. So you can move around and kind of scrub just the individual bits of playback that you want to listen to. And it's at the speed then that you're moving. And if you let go of those keys, I'm holding them down with my left hand on the keyboard, then the cursor changes back to normal. You can also solo individual instruments. So if I use Alt spacebar, I can listen to everybody. And if I just, pardon me, if I hold down Shift as well, I can just solo individual instruments. It's actually really useful if you're trying to work out where there's an accidental you've missed, where there's a problem somewhere, where there's a voicing that's not quite right. Listening to the individual players like that, instead of using the mixer to solo and mute things, is very, very useful. I've already used that myself on a different project. So that kind of thing, scrub playback, and also the stage template there for where the orchestra is sat. But if we look at another piece with kind of a similar idea, this next one, he says, here it is. So in this one here, let's open the larger mixer, the floating mixer for this one. So we've got the same buttons up here. We've got one here for live stage, and there's also one here for live space. So I'm going to choose this one. So this one's setting the reverb, the amount of reverb on the far end, so at the back of where the orchestra are, back of the stage, and at the front of the stage. So you can set how much reverb you want between them. The reverb is, of course, the channel right on the right-hand side over here. So we have a reverb channel here, as we have before. But there's now some extra FX buttons up here, so you can add, or remove, but you can add extra FX channels if you need them. So you can decide different groups of the orchestra want different reverbs, or you want a different reverb at the back to the front, or whatever it is you want to do, you can add those if you want to, and you'll get extra channels. You can also, if I just move slightly out of the way, you can double click down here and you can rename these. So if you prefer to call it delay or echo, or you need to name the two various effects channels that you've got, then you can just double click and you can rename those at the bottom in the mixer there, and it will update these as well. There's also, because you don't want to, when you've set up your orchestra here, then when you move any of these people around, then they will also update the reverbs and the EQ. So you can also, from the play menu, set up a space template. So here we've already got a concert hall loaded, but you could choose a ballroom or a church or a recording studio if you need a deader sound to start off with, or if you want a live sound, that kind of thing. You can set all of these up as well, so you can set those particular options. And for all of these type of things, you can also save your own templates. So, for example, in the piece I had open earlier, let's just reopen that Mozart again for a second. In the Mozart one, ta-da! I had already set up one of the options, which was, of course, use the default orchestra. So we said we'd used our option here to set up our default orchestra. Well, that's good. But maybe you wanted a baroque orchestra, so you can drag all of these items around. It will set the reverbs and the pan positions. You can save a new stage template, and for the stage template for the pan positions for things, you can then save your own so that you can set up, for example, a baroque orchestra. So if I choose this one and press apply and close, then the violins switch sides, because violin 1 and violin 2 would potentially be opposite in that style, and you can move various other things around. So you can have a different setup, all of your own specific stage requirements and anything else you need. So that's that's all very nice. And on a similar kind of idea, if we use this piece here, then in this one, what we have already set up is we have an off-stage oboe over here. So in the beginning of this piece, which is Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique Movement 3, the oboe is off stage. So there's a little duet between the cor anglais and the orchestra and the oboe off stage. So if I choose this one here and press play, and you can move them around if you want to as well, I suppose. Oboe runs across the stage. And wanders back again. So you're not actually going to move them while they're playing, but so that's the idea. So you can set up your own your own stage, your own space requirements, and anything else you need in there, and then you should have everything you need. So what I'm also, while I've got this file open, actually, I'll show you one of the other things. I said we'd maybe look at some of these later, but let's do some now. In the music fonts section in Dorico, so these are the fonts that we're using for note heads and all of the other items, of course. It was previously possible to use various other SmuFL fonts, but we now include all of these ones with Dorico. So we had Bravura and Petaluma previously, but we've now added another 8 options. So for example, if you want to switch to Sebastian, then you can do that, and there's a little tick box which will also update the text fonts that go with it. Or if you want to go to music fonts and say you want to use Finale Maestro, here are these tick boxes at the bottom, so you can update these, and then the look of the score will change accordingly. We'll look at another one of these, maybe with a different appropriate style as well later on. But it's very easy now to do that, and you don't have to worry about how to install them. They're a little bit tricky to install. All of those ones are included. They're also available now in Dorico Elements, and they're also available on Dorico for iPad. So if you use one of these fonts or you want to switch them on the iPad, then you can do that as well. On another little playback option here, I say little, actually, it's not little at all, of course, but it is a little more subtle, this one. So what we have here, Dorico, of course, responds to the dynamics when you write them, and also you'll see down here. So this particular instrument is a flute, and you can see when I choose any of the items here, as before, it shows in the key editor up here. But also down here, this is showing me all of the little grey bits. Now they are these are automated. I've not drawn these in, and they are a little bit grey and white. But these are the automated things that Dorico is doing just to add some of a human element to what's going on the piece here. And this was previously available also to some degree when you go to playback options. And in playback options in the dynamics section, there's all of these beat stress options and accents and things, and they can all change the dynamics slightly. And the beat stresses, you can set how much they would change the dynamics. But what you can also do now is there's a new option here in the humanized section for use pitch contour emphasis. So this will look at the shape of the music. So as the music rises and falls, it will look at the shape of that to also decide what will be happening with the dynamics. And that's best seen down here in the automated bit, where Dorico for this particular instrument is using CC1, a MIDI controller. Some instruments use note velocity. This one happens to use CC1. So if I turn this one on like this and just press apply, then you'll see a greater change in some of the dynamics here, and we'll listen to this in a second. There's also an option, you can also, we've set this by default to scale 100%. In your existing projects, if you open a Dorico 4 or earlier project in Dorico 5, this will be off by default so we don't mess your playback. If you want to, you can turn it on, and it's set to 100 by default. You can over-egg it if you want to. You can make 200% or anything else if you want to. Change any of these other options, but it's a nice subtle effect, but just adds quite a lot to the dynamics and the contour of the music. Also, in the dynamic power curve options that we have here, Dorico by default starts as it goes as low as 6 Ps and goes up to 6 Fs. If you want to change that, so actually if you're only writing between 3 Ps and 3 Fs, but you want a bigger dynamic range that's going on, then you can change this. So you can say actually start at -3 and only go up to +3, so it will only go from 3 Ps to 3 Fs. So if I apply this as well, and down here, this also, you can see it exaggerates the dynamics even further. So if I was just play back part of this, you can hear this then working for a couple of the instruments. So that gives you a little idea. Try it out in some of your own projects, and you'll be able to see either in the velocity lane or in the CC lane any of that happening and what's going on. There are some other for people who really like editing these kind of things themselves manually as well. I'll show you a couple of other things. So in this library menu here, you can edit expression maps. So when you're editing expression maps, and if you've never done this and you're going, I don't know, then you don't need to. But if you do want to get into this kind of thing, then you'd know that individual instruments, they have various different techniques. Now, this particular instrument doesn't need this particular option, but I'll show you how it would work. For all of the different techniques that are available in here, for some sample libraries, not all of the techniques start at exactly the same time. If you were to press a pizzicato and a legato, some of the techniques have a slight delay, which can be a little bit annoying. So there's now an option over here on the right hand side where you can set an individual delay for a particular technique. So maybe you need to set a negative delay for a legato to make sure it's in time with other people who aren't playing a legato. So those kind of options you can set up here for each of these in the expression maps. There's also options at the top up here in the expression map section for the microtonality playback. So previously we were supporting VST note expression, but if you're using Contact or another instrument that doesn't use VST note expression, then you can now also do microtonal playback using pitch bend if you want to, and you can choose that up here at the top, and you can choose the pitch bend range as well. You can also choose whether to apply stage template settings when you're using this expression map. And at the bottom of the expression maps, there are also playback overrides, and these include lots of the new options we've talked about as well. So if you do or don't want to use pitch, contour, emphasis, for example, or if you want to specify the dynamic ranges just for this expression map in a different way to the global settings that I've already shown you, then you can do those kind of things as well. And lastly, when you are editing things, let's have a look in the key editor down here. For all of the things which have note velocities, which actually annoyingly this particular one doesn't, you can see Dorico can show you the dynamics here, but also the note velocities. If you're editing note velocities, so let's choose just an individual one here, then when you edited them previously, you didn't actually have a readout of exactly where you were editing this and what the changes were that you were making. But now there's a readout over here that shows you exactly what the changes are making, and you can also use this to increment or decrement the velocities. So it's just a little option in case you needed it and you'd wondered about that before. Right, so also let's just have another look at one of the other fonts in here. So if I just go to library music fonts again, let's have a look at another one. Let's have Golden Age this time. So one of the other music fonts that you can use to change the style and the look of the piece if you want to. And like I said, this is available for Pro Elements and also on the iPad if you want to change the music fonts. Right, I'm now going to bring up a piece. I know a couple of people were asking about what was the piece of music that we'd used in some of the videos this week. Now I have unarranged this. I've kind of taken it in places and probably didn't envisage. Anyway, so the little piano piece was written, in fact, no, you heard a piano and probably orchestrated versions of it. It was written by Ant, who does lots of our other videos. And if this video is already too long for you, I've put a link in the description to Ant's shorter feature video. So if you want to watch a 10-minute feature video, go and watch that one. So this little piano section I took to start off with. And I have deliberately picked, in our Halion player, a piano. This one's called Nuzzling. It's a LoFi piano. So this is not one of the ones that's included with Dorico, but it is free. So you can go and get this one from the Steinberg website if you want to. It's a free LoFi piano if that's the kind of sound you're looking for. So I started out with that one, kind of taking this particular riff in a different direction. And one of the other things we've added to Dorico 5 is that drums now by default will play back with Groove Agent. So Groove Agent SE is now included with Dorico 5, and you can use this to play back your drums. In fact, if you load up a new project in Dorico 5 and you choose a drum kit, then you will get this drum kit by default. And there are a bunch of other drum kits that you can also choose if you want to load in other kits, but this one we've added by default. So of course you can click on all the pads here, and there are some other buttons here. You can get some of the other pads and things if you want any of these other effects. But there are also patterns. So these pattern buttons, and they all have little notes. Look, this one says C0, this one says C#0, D0. If I choose one of these and hold my mouse down on it, then it plays these patterns. So what you can do in Dorico is a few things with these. So if I bring up my key editor and I choose my drum part here, in bar 5 I'd like some drums, and I could use the MIDI keyboard or in the same way we've done before for all of these drum patterns, but since there's a preset pattern in here, what I'm going to do is take this button here which says C#0 and I'm going to drag it into the key editor. Don't drag it into the score at the top, drag it into the key editor, and it's now notated this drum riff. So now I have this. So that'll save me a little bit of time. Now in this particular style of project, in fact I'm just going to switch to galley view for a second. I might want to tell the drummer sort of, I can edit this rhythm, but I might want to tell him what the kind of idea is that we want. But after that, I'm probably just going to display slashes. So I could take these bars and put slashes over the top, and leave the notes in. But actually, more commonly, what happens is you tell the drummer when some of the pushes are and when some of the other things are. A drum chart really is kind of a guide to the kind of thing you want them to play, but isn't the whole thing. But what you can end up with is that the drums are playing for a bar and then they stop because nothing else is happening. So far all I've notated is the piano part and a bass part, and I want the drums to carry on. So if I choose these 3 bars here, I can now use an option in the right menu called MIDI trigger region. The shortcut says bracket. On my keyboard that's Shift O. So the number, the 0, so the number 0. So create a MIDI trigger region with Shift 0. And I can now type in the option I had over here, which was C#0. So now I get a MIDI trigger region here. Now on these MIDI notes, when you've been using Dorico previously, we've tended to say that middle C was C4, and that was the international standard we were using. But a lot of Yamaha, other Steinberg, and some other sample players, including Groove Agent, they think that middle C, or they call middle C C3 for reasons that I'm not going to go into right now. There are other companies who also say that middle C is C5, again for reasons we don't need to talk about right now. So if we go to the Dorico preferences, you can now in the general section set what you prefer to call middle C. Do you want C3, C4 or C5? So this is probably your default. This is the one that I've chosen because that's the one I want, which updates everything. It updates this bit down here on the keyboard. It would update the expression maps. It updates when they're listed on the left hand side. It updates when you choose a note. And the key editor, it tells you here, it updates all of these. So it'll update everywhere to tell you what they are. So that's why I can type C#0 and that agrees with this. It's just a bit of a sanity check for me to make sure I'm in the right place. So now these drums will continue playing because Dorico is going to trigger the drums on the right note for the length of this region. And you can change these regions with little drag handles at the end, like you can with lots of other regions in Dorico, or with the shortcuts that we'll use in a second. So that's the first option. Is you can very easily trigger drums from here. Now I've written in a bass part in here, but the bass I've used is an extra bass that is one you can buy from Steinberg. This one happens to be called Laid Back. So this is our electric bass plugin. It's the Steinberg electric bass. And the reason I've used this one, and it also has some other effects and things in it. So if I choose this bar here and do Shift and the number 0 again, then I can do a trigger region here, and in this particular case I want a D#4. I know that because I've looked it up previously, and I can also in brackets put the note velocity that I want it to use. You can also do all of these if you want to trigger in from a MIDI keyboard. So if I hold down, if I press a note on my MIDI keyboard, oops, I can turn my volume off. So I can choose all of these and I can find which note it is I want to use, and then I can enter that. And I was just pressing the notes on my MIDI keyboard to find the one I wanted. I'm going to shorten this with Alt-Shift and the left arrow, and I can also move it with Alt, and I can also drag these with the mouse so I can put it in the right place. I'm going to do, very quickly, I'm going to do the same for the drums, so they're going to have a little fill here. So this is going to be an A-1, which I can also make shorter like that and put there. No, put there. Now, for the guitar part, some guitar plugins and things that you use, they also have preset riffs and things. So I've used, again, this is an extra Steinberg one, not included with Dorico 5, but it's one that you can buy if you want to, called TGuitar. There's another one called M-Guitar. Other ones are also available from other companies. This one has patterns, as well as solo and chords and various other things, it has patterns. And in this patterns section, what you can do is when you hold down a chord with your left hand on the keyboard, you can see I'm holding down a chord here of an E minor, and then all of these red keys will trigger a strumming pattern. So if I press one note on for those, I can play various strumming patterns. So I can find one that I want. I can choose how long I want it to last. I can press Shift and the number O. I can hold down and just press the options I want. And into this popover, Dorico has written all of the notes I wanted and the note velocity, which I hit maximum, so it was 127. So now I've got a little trigger region here, and I can change the size of this because I only want it to happen for those 2 bars. And let's just do the same here. So on this one here, I think I want something probably like that. Maybe a bit louder. There we go. So now I've got 2 chords in here. I can also do the same for some other instruments. So I've got, again, not included with Dorico, but just as an option, this is a singer option called Voice of Wind Adey, which is also another Steinberg option. It's in partnership with Sound Iron. This one, you can choose various keys that you want and various other patches and things, and there are samples which are pre-recorded, and you can tweak them a little if you want to, but they're pre-recorded samples of somebody singing. So what I'm going to just do in here is say for this vocal ad-lib that we've got here, I'd like her to just kind of sing something so that we'll hear the right sort of thing. So when I give the part to the singer, it's just going to say vocal ad-lib and they can do what they like. But in this particular case, what I would like is a particular note and a particular note velocity in there. They also, on this plugin, they've got some little breath effects, so let's use one of those as well. So we'll put one of those in, one of those in there. If I just shorten that a bit and put it just before there, so when she breathes in. Let's do the same here, let's do a different one. So let's say on these ones here, we'll say I want this one. And then the bar before, maybe she'll breathe in a different way, so let's pick a different one. I don't know, velocity. I guess she needs to know how loud to breathe in. Maybe she doesn't want to breathe in. There we go. So I've added all of these little regions. So now if I go back to page view here and turn that bit off, you can hide any of these regions, of course, as with the other ones. So in the view menu, you can highlight all of these options and you can turn them off if you don't want to see them. And if you have a shortcut key set to hide invisibles, then you can also use that to turn all of these off temporarily if you want to. So if you want to do that kind of thing, then by all means. But at the moment, I'm showing you with all the colours where all of these things happen. So let's play this from the beginning. So you'll hear the free piano, which was the LoFi Piano. The drum kit is included with Dorico 5. And then the bass guitar and soprano are extra things that you can optionally get, I'm sure. Other companies also make similar. Yes, there are no lyrics. So that just gives you an idea. So there are lots of options that you can use, that you can trigger, and there are probably lots of other cases you can think of where you want to trigger contact or you want to trigger something. You don't want to put the notes actually on the page because they're not actually for the real performer. You just want it for playback to trigger. Maybe it's when you're going to use the export audio option and you're going to export a file and you just like it to sound right. Maybe it's when you've got to a solo section or something and the drums are no longer playing because you've just given them slashes, or the guitar part, or or etc. etc. But that gives you an idea of the kind of things that you can do, and you can add to that should you want to. So let's move on to some other options. Now, this particular next option is one that my colleague Marcus set up, and I really liked this one. I mean, I really like all of Marcus's examples, but this one was a very neat little example. And if you would like to watch Marcus's session in German, then probably following this one, so at 5 p.m. German time, there'll be a session in German covering lots of the other options in Dorico as well. So in this particular case here, I'm just going to play it back. If you don't understand any German, basically, it's play on pass. So the different passes that this does as it plays it back, it will play back different options. Let's have a listen first. Yes, I think it needs an extra note at the end as well. But anyway, let's not worry about that. So let's have a look at how this is done. So when you choose some of these options, look, there are new options in the properties panel down here for suppress on passes and suppress playback. So you can choose various items like dynamics, and you can tell it when it's not going to do these items and when it is going to do these items. So this one is suppressed on 2 and 3. This one is suppressed on 1 and 4. This writ is suppressed on passes 1 to 3. There's the second time playback options. There's a only play on third. So there's all sorts of options that have now been set. So you can choose for lots of different items on there which one plays back. I think dynamics is probably one of the most commonly requested ones. You might not necessarily label them exactly like this, but you get the idea now. So you can have different dynamics at different times, as it's doing the repeat playback, and you can set all of those up with these options in the properties panel down here. So I know lots of people are going to like that, and thank you, Marcus, for that example. I think you said I was allowed to use that one. Apologies if not, I just did. So that's, I just thought that was a really succinct way of showing that, and really like that one. So now I'm going to move into a section which is kind of lots of things that you might want to do in a project, and these are the kind of things that will probably really speed up your daily workflow in things, and they were important things to show. Actually, the first thing is just if I make a new project for a second, sometimes you start a new project and you don't have, or even partway through a project, you don't have quite the instrument you're looking for. So we have in the add players, I think there's 600 instruments? I don't know. There's a lot of instruments anyway. In the library menu now, there's an instruments option, which is an instrument editor. So in here, it's chosen all of the instruments, and there are some filters over here, and you can filter by families, and you can find various instruments in here. Since the piano is already selected, I'm going to press a button down here, which is new instrument from selection. So it's going to take the piano, and it's going to make me a new instrument, piano copy. So let's say I just want to call this one Rhodes. I'm going to make a Fender Rhodes type instrument instead. So I changed the name for the instrument picker, but I also want to change the staff labels. So I'll say edit instrument names, and I'll go into here and say Rhodes, and let's say RHDS dot maybe. So I've edited the staff labels here. You can also edit other things. So you can edit the number of staves, the number of staff lines, the number of what the brackets are doing, whether it's a vocal staff, the clefs that are used. You can do the transposition if you want to, and the range. In fact, let's do the range. So this one, because my middle C is C3, it'll be E0 to E6. The advanced range actually will be the same in this particular case. So I've set the ranges of that instrument. I can press OK. So now when I go to add a single player, it means I can now just type Rhodes, and I get my Rhodes instrument that I've created. There's also another option in there which is worth looking at the moment for this button here, which is new variant from selection. So if I choose that one, then let's say we're going to have a piccolo. We have a piccolo in C and a piccolo in D flat already. Occasionally somebody's asked me for a piccolo in D, so let's say make a new variant instead, and I'll show you why we want a variant. So this one, I'm going to say the variant name is D. We can edit the instrument name just to remove the word copy from there. So I'll just call it piccolo, that's fine. You could call it piccolo in D if you wanted to, but I'm going to leave it for now. The number of staves is fine, the clefs are fine. You could change the transposition. And you can also, if you want to, change the range. I could. I don't know what the range is right now, so I'll come back to that one. Also, if you want this to exist in more than just this project that you're working on, then what you might want to do is press this little star button. This exists in quite a few dialogues in Dorico, but the star button is save as default. So I could then add that, so it's then available for all new projects going on from this point. And of course, you can import and export various other options into existing projects from the library menu as well. So if I press OK, then the difference with this piccolo is that now when I say I want a piccolo, instead of just being here in the list like the Rhodes was, it's a variant, so it's now in this list on the right hand side. So as well as C and D flat that we had previously, there's also a piccolo in D, so you can choose that one and add that one to your project as well if you want to. So the instrument editor, I think, is probably going to be really, really useful for a lot of people, just for making those changes to the instruments that you want that maybe we haven't added yet. There will be some other things that we'll be able to do in there that we can't quite do today. So things like editing the family names, maybe editing where your new instrument exists in an orchestral layout or in a band layout, that kind of thing. We'll do those in a future update in Dorico 5 series as well. So that was just the instrument editor options. Now, other things and kind of time-saving, useful daily things, I think. So the first is if you had a selection, let's say like this one, if I was just to select all of these notes, and I'll just do it by dragging a box, and then add dynamics. So let's say I want to use Shift D, and I said, you know, a classic P hairpin to F. Then in Dorico 4, when I press enter, the P would start here because that's where I'd started it from. Whereas in actual fact, when I press enter, what you probably wanted is this, which is that it looks for the first note and it starts the dynamics at that point, and then they're all going to end at this point. So that's because there's a new preference option. So in the note input and editing section, there's a new preference option down here, he says scrolling, for create items at position of first selected note. So if for some reason you don't want this, untick it. There's also a create clefs at position of first selected note. Now you might not want that one when you do want the first one, so that's why it's an extra. So that would mean, you know, does your clef change all happen at that first beginning, or does it actually change just when they play that first note and when the clef change happens? There's also create separate trills for each selected note, which in some cases you don't want on, so you can have that as a separate option if you wanted to. So some other things that might be useful when you're doing this. So for example, like we mentioned trills, if I select all of these notes here and then I use the Shift O ornament and say trills, then I'll get trills in all of those. If I was to select all of these notes here and do Shift P and type pits, then in Dorico 4 I would have just got a pits on the top one and I would have had to duplicate it to the others. In Dorico 5 it's now creating one of those items on all of those staves, which is a very useful option. Also for things like, I'm not quite sure on not being a string player, let's just say we need to, for some reason, specify, maybe it's a school, when what the bowings are. If I select a bunch of notes, then when I do things like, say, down bow, then it will add a down bow to all of those items as well. That could also be a useful option you want to use. And also, if you're doing things like creating slash regions and that kind of thing, then when you say things like slash, it will create them across all of those instruments as well, which it previously wouldn't have done. You would have created one and had to copy it. Now, this note input option, I think, is... I really agree with Daniel when he said he wished he'd thought of this. I wish I'd thought of this, and thank you whoever did think of this. So when you're inputting notes, real basic inputting notes. In fact, well, we'll make it more complicated. We'll do it over multiple staves. So you can choose, for example, 5 for a quaver, 8th note, and you can enter great, yeah, as before. But when you want to enter things like dotted 8th notes, dotted quavers, you had to press 5 and then move quite a long way to where the dot was on your keyboard. Now you can just press 5, 5. You just press the same number again and you get a dotted version. So now you've got, what do we, oh no. And if I do 7, 7, then I get a dotted minim, dotted half note. So all of these options, you just press 6, 6, you get dotted crotchets, 5, 5, 4/4. You just double tap, basically, double tap, and you get the dotted version of it. It really does speed things up because you don't have to look down at the keyboard or anything else. You can just move across the numbers across the top of your keyboard, press the right number, and just double tap it, and you get a dotted version. And actually, it's just really useful. Also, while I think about it, if we do things like hairpins now, then I will add to this one and say it's a Niente hairpin. There are some new options for the size of that circle, or if you're using an N instead, then what the font is for that one, how far away it sits from the hairpin, and that kind of thing as well. So those things, oh yes, we went to pits earlier, didn't we? So those kind of things for all of the Niente things, they are all now a lot more customizable. So if you've used those before, then you'll find those much easier to use. Or something. Don't worry about the collisions. It's just because I'm in galley view. There we go. So a few other things on this. So here we have some notes for harp. If you're writing glissandos previously, you'd select 2 notes and you put a gliss between them and then select the others, and etc. etc. You can now select a whole bunch of notes and you can use the Shift-O popover and type gliss, and Dorico will gliss between them all. So nice little time-saving option. For harp or piano or various other things as well, if you wanted to do things like arpeggios, then you can type arp, and we'll now get arpeggios across all of those, which is much more useful. Previously, you would have got one on the first item, but not on the other ones, so those kind of things are much more useful now. There's also some other options for things like in the notation options. I know this one has been talked about in the Facebook group quite a lot. So things like, notate a single note and this kind of thing. You can use common time grouping for cut time signatures and that kind of thing. So you can specify how these things are going to apply for cut common time. You couldn't previously, so you can now. If you've got you've added another instrument later in setup mode, and I've only got 2 at the moment, but if you've added extra instruments and then your numbering's gone a bit squiffy, this is supposed to be trumpet 1 because the notes are higher, but you added it later, etc. etc. There's a new option in the setup menu for renumber instruments, so it can renumber these automatically across the whole project. Again, I know that was something that came up on Facebook that people had talked about before. There's some new chord options. I think there's probably always somebody in the Dorico office working on chord symbols. We'll never stop. But anyway, chord symbol options now. So these ones, for example, in fact, we just need to switch to page view, or we won't see all of the changes. Here we go. I don't know if Michael Rahanik's still up, but I know it's quite late in Australia. So now, for these chord symbols, we've got these slash ones here. And if I just scroll down here, you can see all of the various chord options. Spot the ones that are new. Maybe not. When you're looking at these kind of items here for stacked arrangements and linear arrangements and that kind of thing, there's now a new option for how. So here we are in the position section. Are they going to align with the top? Or are they going to align with the middle, even if they're diagonal ones? Or are they going to align with the bottom chord? So you can set the positions of those. That's a new option for those. There's also options for the brackets. So if I keep going down here, there's a scale parenthesis to height of chord symbol. So these ones that I've put in brackets, I'm not talking about these ones at the moment. We're talking about these ones. They can scale according to the height of the chord symbol. And there's also an option here that you can set the percentage of the relative height, so how big you want these brackets to be. I think 115 is the default. 100 is maybe a bit small. Yeah, that's maybe a little bit small, so 115. So you can set the different sizes of the brackets for those, which is very nice. For these kind of stacked arrangements, so if you have a look in the alterations section, there's now some new items, so they can be left aligned, I think was the previous default, and you can now center them so that the alterations will be centered underneath like that, and that's centered all of those, which is what we wanted. And then there's also an option for this one here, which is it's actually a 6/9 chord with an added 11th, but because these are alterations or considered that way, then it was showing this way. So now if you go to intervals, there's a new option here for use the 6/9 appearance for chords with a 6th and a 9th. and then show the additional options. And of course, there's various ways you can still show this, but the option to make sure they're working is a little tick box here. So you set that one. So that's another useful addition. And in this one here, we have some capo chords. So if I go to the capo section, as well as whether they're in parentheses, which was there before, you now have options to say, I've lost it now, haven't I? There's an option to, oh, I know what it was. It was positioning of them. So you can say here, the horizontal alignment of the transposed chord symbol. So this is left aligned, and this one here is centered. So they just moved slightly, just little positioning requirements. So of course, you can do lots of manual changes, but actually it's these kind of things that will save you time, knowing that these kind of things exist so that you can use lots of those when you need them. So, all of those kind of things, I think hopefully you also find very, very useful. There's also all sorts of other things. So I definitely heartily recommend downloading the version history document. If you load SDA, the Steinberg Download Assistant, or if you're going to our website and you look in the download section, you can download the version history document. It's a PDF. It looks something like this. And this has all of the detail. So it shows you, it's handily for version 5. It's currently 55 pages as well. So it's your bedtime reading. Your homework for this evening is, now this tells you all of the details. It tells you lots of the things that I've discussed and mentioned, and shown, but lots of other things as well. So for example, I did a quick search in here for things like XML. So XML export has changed in Dorico 5. So we have some new options here for when we export. For example, we'll now export the music and text fonts. We now tell you what the font, the note heads are that are being used, the page size and margins, those kind of things, and some system formatting can now be in the XML export. And for import, there's all sorts of things. So things like ornaments and harmonics and playing techniques and staff labels. There's all sorts of things to do with transpositions and voice direction and that kind of thing. They're all things that are in the XML import as well. So lots of improvements both sides if you're going to and from other programs and need that. There's also, if you look through this version history document, I'm going to check my notes, there's things for, text frames. You can have background colors and frame colors. There are clef changes and octave lines where you can specify that they're only in the score or only in the parts. You can have there's a new vertical rest positioning option for voices to make sure that they're all in alignment. There's the non-breaking spaces when you're editing a line of lyrics in that little dialogue. You can now put non-breaking spaces in. I was asked for that one recently, so I'm glad that one's in. There's things like there are more baroque ornaments now here. They're behind my head. There's too many now. I've got to get out of the way. So they're in there. If you're adding Unicode symbols in text items and that kind of thing, you can now do those as well. There's all sorts of new things that you can do. And as I said before, if you're using Dorico Elements or Dorico on the iPad with a subscription, then in engrave mode, you now have these extra options. Let's go to something with some music in. You now have these extra options for the staff spacing, and you've got these extra options for the note spacing as well. So if you need to make those kind of changes, you can now even do that in Dorico Elements. If you're on the iPad, those options exist on the iPad, so you can use those. You will need a keyboard to be able to use these at the moment, at least. And also on the iPad now, you can enable MIDI out, including via Bluetooth. So if you were at NAMM, any eagle-eyed people at NAMM this year, you might have noticed Dorico on the iPad was being shown on a disc clavier, and it can play the disc clavier because it now has Bluetooth MIDI out as well as Bluetooth MIDI in. So it's lots of nice little extra options there. So hopefully that's a whirlwind tour of, but a fairly good idea of, lots of the new things that are in Dorico 5. It's really the beginning of our Dorico 5 series. I'm sure we'll be doing other updates and things as we go. I'm just going to have a quick look in the comments. They've been going past too fast for me to keep an eye on them all, but just let me see if there's something that I need to mention that Daniel hasn't mentioned. So bear with me 2 seconds. No, it's funny, Daniel seems to know all the answers. It's very, very strange. So I think all of the options there are all... Somebody shout if there's anything that I need to mention at the moment. There's a couple of comments about using some of the stage templates with various libraries. Some libraries, they have already pre-panned things themselves, so you might not want to. And there is a default template that you can use to kind of reset everything in Dorico to the middle. So you might want to use that one in some cases, because otherwise you get very, very exaggerated panning. They'll be kind of next door. But it looks like I think all of those things. Oh, there's an awful lot of comments, so I think those ones have all been answered. So let me just see at the end if anybody has mentioned anything we have missed. I did follow the show playhead thing. I did, yes. So when you press play, and Dorico normally moves, if there's a little follow playhead option here. So if you turn this off, this little toggle, just move my shoulder. Oh, I'm away. So the page isn't moving. So the page didn't move because I'd toggled this tiny little switch down here, and if I put it back on, then when I press play, then the page would and does jump again to move to show me where I am. So if you want the follow playhead little toggle, it's down at the bottom there. There's a question about yes, there was a change to there's none in here. There was a change to drum kits in Dorico 3.5. You could edit all of the individual bits of the drum kit in play mode and the routing, and you can now do it again in Dorico 5. So here we have a drum set here, and if I expand this, then you'll see here's all of the items for the drum kit. So you can now route all of these individually if you want to route them somewhere else. You're right, I've forgotten one. Okay, I meant to do this here. So, well, somewhere, doesn't matter really where. So, I've completely missed one of those feature. Yeah. And as Lily said, there's loads of stuff we put in this version. Anyway, so let's do this. So if I select some notes from here, one of the things people wanted to be able to do, and to be honest, it's something that I guess I would do it by accident, so I tend not to do it this way. When you've got some notes selected, if you click on them with your mouse, you can now drag them. And you see a little grey note to tell you where you're going to drag it to. So I can now drag them up and down, so I can change the pitch. If I try and drag them left and right, they won't now drag left and right because I've already started moving them up and down. If I let go and then click on them again and drag them to the right, I can drag them somewhere else in the music if I want to. But I now can't drag them up and down unless I want to change to a different instrument. So I could drag them down here to the cello. So I've moved these notes and I've dragged them all the way down here. So I'm going to press undo for a second. Because another thing you might want to do is you might want to drag them to the right and then hold down Alt. You can see the rhythm grid, so you know exactly where you're going to drop them. And then you can let go. Because I've got Alt held down, then it does a copy. So I can copy them somewhere else. And if I do the same, if I do a little wiggle to the left or right, I can now move them down to another instrument. And then if I hold down Alt, then I can copy them to another instrument. And of course, I can now drag them again for that particular instrument if I need to. So live editing, so that you can drag things around and move things around, actually in some cases really handy just to be able to do that. And I think for people, if you're talking to people who are getting into Dorico for the first time, they sort of expect to be able to do that. Really, it's still much more accurate and probably safer to use Alt and use the arrow keys to do it. But if you want to, then one or more notes, you can drag it with a mouse, you can drag it up and down, or you can drag it left and right, so that you're kind of constrained and you're not kind of accidentally dragging them in both directions at the same time, and you can drag them to other staves. How did I miss that one? There's so many things to talk about that I missed one. I apologise. Let's see. Is there anything else I've missed? Yes, no, he's not going easy on me, yes. Just one more thing. Is there anything else? Somebody quickly tell me. Is there anything else that you really want to see that you think I've missed? Oh yes, there's the live editing thing, says Ben. I'm sorry. Graham, look, I'm sorry. I know you've worked a long time on that one, and I'm sorry. We've shown it now. Looks like yeah. Thank you, Lily. Also, yes, for the manual and the guides. So yes, for the updates to the manual and the guides. So if you want any of the useful information, there is the version history, but that's kind of just what's new now. The manuals have been updated so that you have all of the information together for how you do all of these things, no matter which version you've come from. You'll be able to find all the useful things in the manual as well. And also, there's a lot of new videos from Ant as well on particular features. So if you want to share this information with other people, then please do. You can send them. There's a playlist for all of the new things that are in Dorico. There's one video that shows you kind of feature highlights or highlights of all the features in one quick video. And don't forget, of course, we also did the Dorico Does It Better video recently, so that's also available on our YouTube channel. In fact, I'll put a link to that underneath this video as well. So it's kind of a highlights tour of, from all the versions of Dorico, here's a bunch of useful things that you may well want to do if you've not tried Dorico before at all. So please share those with other people as well. The chat's slightly it's going past slightly too fast for me to read it again. I think we're okay. I think we're done. So we'll be online anyway. So you can find us, of course, on the forum as normal. So dorico.com/forum. You can find us on the Facebook page. So facebook.com/groups/Dorico. So get in touch with us. You can email me if you want to on discoverdorico@steinberg.de. If you want to go and buy Dorico today, then I would suggest you pop over to our website. So if you go to dorico.com, it will redirect you to steinberg.net/Dorico. If you click on Dorico 5 here, then in your currency, it will show you all the right options. So you can buy Dorico Pro or Dorico Elements. So if you go to Dorico Pro, for example, it will tell you in your currency what the upgrades and updates are, and you can update from Dorico Pro 4 or from previous versions. So in showing me at the moment in pounds, it would show you in dollars or euros or whichever country. Don't forget we also have education versions available from here for that. So, and there are cross grades as well available. So if you're buying for the first time, don't forget there's a cross grade. If you're updating, then of course you can get any of these options. If you are using Dorico Elements, I said that was probably the a very good option for a lot of people. The updates from Elements here, from Elements 4, is just £25, Elements 4 update to 5. And then there's also, if you've got an earlier version of Elements, you can get that from there. You can also upgrade from Dorico SE for this one if you want to. And there are also education prices. So if you're buying Dorico Elements for the first time, £57 if you use pound sterling. So yes, go to the website if you want to find out what the costs are in your particular currency. Also, we have multi-seat options available. So if you're an educational institution and you are looking at kind of kitting out a lab or a number of students, that kind of thing, then there are also options available there. You can find those from our website. If you can't find them, email me, discoverdorico@steinberg.de, and we can put you in touch with people in the right country. So I think I've not missed anything really obvious, at least. Good start. So, like I said, we'll be online a little while to answer comments in the live chat. It will run for a few more minutes, and then you can find us at the various options, and I will put lots of links below this video so you can skip through it later. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again on the next one. Thank you.